My name is Emily Carter, and the moment I hit delete, I felt a strange, quiet kind of peace. Not fear, not regret, just peace. He stood there smirking, leaning against my cubicle wall like he owned the entire floor. Maybe he thought he did. Delete all code and files from your laptop, he said, voice dripping with arrogance. All your work belongs to the company now. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. His name was Ryan Moore, my ex-supervisor, and once upon a time, someone I trusted with everything, my ideas, my effort, even my weekends. He'd stolen all of it, piece by piece, claiming my projects as his own, climbing higher while I got the scraps. That morning, I'd been called into his office for what he called a performance review. It was just another chance for him to show off his power. He told me I was being let go, downsizing, he said, and that the intellectual property I created while working there was company-owned. But when he leaned closer, whispering, "Delete everything, Emily, before you leave," I saw it in his eyes, that smug glint that meant he'd already planned something crueler than firing me. He wanted to erase my existence from this company. My ideas, my code, my contribution. He didn't know that I'd been planning my exit for weeks, that I had already backed up every single file to an encrypted cloud drive, that I'd been collecting proof of what he'd done, how he'd used my software to secure multi-million-dollar contracts under his name. He just thought I was another disposable employee. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The cursor blinked, waiting for my command. He crossed his arms and smirked again. "Do it. Delete it all. You don't own any of this." So I did. I hit select all. And then delete. The files vanished, line after line, folders collapsing into nothing. My desktop turned blank, clean, empty, final. He grinned like a predator watching its prey die. "Good girl," he said and walked out. But what he didn't know was that I'd just lit the fuse. When he left for lunch, I packed my things quietly, calmly. People avoided my eyes. No one wanted to be caught sympathizing with a soon-to-be ex-employee. But inside, I was already 3 steps ahead. The backup was safe, stored off-site. Every email, every version history, every commit log showing that I, not Ryan, had written the core code of the company's flagship AI model. I walked out of the building without a word. I thought it was over, that my revenge would take shape in time, through lawyers or leaks or quiet exposure. But fate, it seems, had a flair for drama. Because when Ryan returned from lunch, the CEO was waiting in his office. Later, people told me the room had been dead silent when he walked in, until the CEO's voice, cold and dangerously low, cut through the tension. "The bank just called," the CEO said. "Tell me exactly what you told her to do." And that's when the real story began. I didn't know then how fast things would spiral, how my small act of defiance would bring down one of the biggest frauds in the company's history. But that's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always start with rage. Sometimes it begins with silence. With a single click. I'd spent years building that code, perfecting it. It was my baby, my obsession. I wrote most of it during sleepless nights, powered by caffeine and sheer stubbornness. Ryan had noticed my dedication early on, too early. He'd started mentoring me, helping me polish my presentations, giving me feedback that always conveniently aligned with his career goals. At first, I was flattered. He made me feel seen, valued. But slowly, I began noticing little things, ideas from our private brainstorming sessions showing up in his reports, slides from my decks reworded and presented as his. When I confronted him the first time, he laughed it off. "We're a team, Emily," he said. "What's yours is ours." But it wasn't ours. It was mine. So when he said, "Delete everything," I knew it was his last move, his way of wiping out the evidence before anyone could prove how deep his theft went. He thought he'd won. But he didn't know that while he was busy stealing my work, I was quietly learning how to protect myself. Encrypting my backups. Forwarding logs to private servers. Building a timeline of every commit, every file, every modification, all traceable back to me. So, as he sat in that glass office with the CEO glaring down at him, I knew the clock had started ticking. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. If I told you this all started with ambition, I wouldn't be lying. I was 26, fresh out of grad school, desperate to prove myself in a tech company where everyone seemed smarter, louder, and more connected than me. That's when Ryan Moore entered my life. Charismatic, confident, the kind of man who made a room orbit around him. He was a senior developer when I joined the company, and he noticed me early, not because I was special, but because I worked like I had something to prove. He'd swing by my desk late at night, when most of the office lights were off. "You still here, Carter?" he'd tease. I'd smile, pretending I didn't notice how his eyes lingered on my screen. "Just chasing perfection," I'd say. He'd chuckle, that smooth, patronizing kind of laugh. "Careful with that. Perfection has a cost." I didn't understand then what he meant, but I would. Over time, Ryan became my mentor. He praised my problem-solving skills in meetings, gave me exposure to bigger projects, and told everyone I was his best find. It felt good, intoxicating even. I was finally being seen. We'd brainstorm for hours, bouncing ideas about machine learning optimization and predictive algorithms. He'd say things like, "We'll change the industry together, Emily." I believed him. When the company landed a huge client, a Fortune 500 bank, it was based almost entirely on a demo I had built. The algorithm could detect fraud in real time using pattern recognition models I'd written from scratch. The executives were blown away. Ryan presented it. My slides, my data, my logic. He gave a short nod toward me when the CEO congratulated him, as if to say, "Good job, kid." That night, while everyone celebrated, I sat alone at my desk, staring at the project folder. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit. Success for the team meant success for me, right? But a few weeks later, when performance bonuses were announced, Ryan got a promotion and a corner office. My name wasn't even mentioned. That's when something inside me shifted. I started noticing the patterns. Files I hadn't shared appearing in company presentations. My commit logs edited, timestamps mismatched. He had admin access, of course. He could rewrite history with a few keystrokes. The first time I confronted him, it was quiet, controlled. "Ryan," I said, closing the office door behind me, "why is my code in your presentation deck?" He leaned back in his chair, unbothered. "Because we're a team, Emily. Everything we make belongs to the company." "That's not what I'm asking." He smiled, that same smirk I would later remember so vividly. "You're young. You don't understand how this works yet." He stood, straightening his tie. "Look, if you want credit, work your way up. Titles come with ownership. Until then, just be glad I'm protecting your job." Protecting my job. That line stayed with me, like a thorn under my skin. For months, I tried to focus on work, telling myself it wasn't worth fighting. But every time someone congratulated Ryan for his brilliant AI system, I felt the ground under me shift a little more. Then came the final straw, the internal email leak. An HR intern accidentally forwarded a thread between Ryan and the CEO to the whole department. In it, Ryan had described my work as a rough concept he refined and perfected. He even claimed I'd need more guidance before being trusted with lead responsibilities. I remember staring at that email, my hands trembling. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollow. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened a blank document titled Plan B. It started small. Back up all source code to an encrypted cloud. Copy commit logs with timestamps. Record all correspondence with Ryan. Create documentation linking each algorithm to my local machine signature. I didn't know what I would do with it all, not yet. But I knew I needed proof, not for revenge, but for survival. Weeks turned into months. Ryan kept climbing, his arrogance growing with every success built on my work. I kept quiet, perfecting my backup system, encrypting everything he couldn't touch. Then, one Friday morning, he called me into his office. "You're being reassigned," he said flatly. "Your project's going to a new team. I'll need you to clear your local files." I stared at him. "Why?" "Company reorganization," he said, smirking. "You'll thank me later." That was the day I realized he wasn't just stealing my work, He was erasing me. I went home that night and wrote in my journal, "If they think I'm replaceable, let them try." From that moment, my revenge stopped being a fantasy. It became a system, cold, patient, and mathematical. I started mirroring his moves, collecting patterns, watching who he met, which servers he accessed, how he talked to upper management. He thought I was still naive, that I'd roll over. But the next time he said, "Delete everything," I'd be ready. I just needed the right moment, and that moment came the day the CEO called the bank. The Monday after Ryan's smug little "delete everything" stunt, the office felt different. You could sense it in the air, that low, electric hum that comes before a storm. Rumors spread fast in corporate hallways, especially when they involved the CEO. By noon, half the company had heard that something had gone very wrong in Ryan Moore's department. I didn't come in that day. I didn't have to. My part was already done. When I hit delete, I hadn't just erased local files. I'd also triggered a digital trail. A hidden log that connected every deleted file to its original creator. Me. Every commit, every push, every version of the AI code still existed, not on their servers, but on mine. And when those files vanished from the company's system, the discrepancies would scream loud enough to be noticed. That morning, I sat at a cafe across from the building, laptop open, coffee untouched. My phone buzzed with notifications from coworkers. "What did you do? Ryan's in trouble. CEO's furious." I sipped my coffee and smiled, because this was exactly what I'd planned. Apparently, the CEO had received a call from the bank, the one Ryan had used my software to impress months earlier. They'd reported an issue. The algorithm suddenly stopped running. Their fraud detection system had crashed, and millions of transactions were frozen. The bank was threatening to pull their contract, a contract worth 7 figures. When Ryan swaggered into the office after lunch, the CEO and CFO were already waiting. And when they asked him about the missing files, about the code dependencies and backups, his face reportedly turned white. "What do you mean the system's gone?" he stammered. The CEO's voice, cold and cutting. "The bank's calling it intellectual property fraud. They want to know why the lead developer's credentials, Emily Carter's credentials, were found in their back-end code." That was the moment it all began to unravel. Ryan must have realized then that I'd left a fingerprint in the code, subtle, invisible to the naked eye, but traceable to me. My signature was embedded deep inside the framework, a simple line in the metadata. // developed by E.S. Carter, 2023. He'd never noticed it because I'd hidden it in a system file under a different extension, buried where no one would look unless they were auditing the entire source. Now, the CEO was asking why my name appeared on proprietary code that Ryan had sworn he built. He stuttered, lied, tried to redirect blame. She must have copied my framework before leaving. You know how emotional she was. But the CEO had already checked the audit trail. The timestamps didn't lie. By the time the legal department got involved, it was over. I got a call that evening from Anna, a friend in HR. Her voice trembled between shock and awe. "Emily, the board's meeting right now. Ryan's suspended. They're calling it a code ownership crisis. You're trending on the internal message boards." I closed my laptop and stared out the cafe window, watching the rain streak down the glass. It felt surreal. Months of quiet humiliation, stolen credit, late nights crying in my car, all leading to this one moment. But revenge, I learned, doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like gravity releasing its grip after years of holding you down. 2 days later, the company contacted me formally. Legal email. Polite tone. "We'd like to discuss the recent incident involving proprietary algorithms." I met them at a downtown office, a sleek conference room with too many suits and too little oxygen. The CEO, Richard Hale, was there. Gray hair, sharp eyes, the kind of man who could smell weakness before you spoke. "Emily," he said, folding his hands. "We've reviewed your code. You're talented, very talented. But I need to understand what happened." I took a breath. Ryan told me to delete all files when I was terminated. So I did. But I also protected my work beforehand. I wasn't aware he'd stolen it to secure contracts. The room went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Richard nodded slowly. You understand that what he did could cost this company millions. I understand, I said. But you should also understand that my name is on that code, legally and digitally. And if anyone tries to use it again without my consent, I'll go public. He looked at me for a long time, then smiled just slightly. You're smarter than he said you were. That was the first time anyone at that company had spoken to me like an equal. By the end of the week, Ryan was gone, escorted out by security. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, the CEO called me again. We'd like to offer you a consulting position, he said, to help us rebuild what he destroyed. At double your previous salary. I almost laughed. Revenge had come full circle, poetic and precise. But I wasn't done yet. Ryan had cost me years of work, recognition, and peace of mind. I wanted him to feel the same helplessness, the kind that eats you alive. So I said yes. Not because I wanted to work for them again, but because I wanted to finish what I started. Over the next few weeks, I sat in Ryan's old office, his chair, his computer, his nameplate gone. Every time someone walked by, they did a double take. The ghost of him lingered in that space, and I made sure it stayed that way. One afternoon, Anna stopped by, holding a USB drive. IT found this in his desk, she said. You might want to see it. On it were files, personal ones. Emails, messages, documents, proof that Ryan had not only stolen my work, but also manipulated internal data, inflated reports, and funneled side payments from vendors. It was worse than I thought. And I knew exactly what to do next. When I first opened the USB drive Anna handed me, I thought I'd find simple proof of Ryan's lies, maybe a few files he shouldn't have had, or a trail of copied code. I didn't expect to find his entire empire of deceit. The drive contained folders labeled with months, clients, and fake invoice names. Inside were emails between Ryan and several outside contractors, people he'd been paying off to adjust company performance reports. There were PDF invoices under shell companies, all routed to his personal PayPal. He wasn't just stealing my work, he was embezzling money from the company. I sat there for a long time, staring at the evidence. My heartbeat was steady, almost calm. I realized that for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't scared of him anymore. He had taken my confidence, my reputation, my peace. Now I was holding the digital knife that would cut his entire career to pieces. But I wasn't impulsive. Revenge like this needed precision, not fury. I spent the weekend compiling the evidence into a single, airtight file. I renamed it Project Integrity. Inside, I included the stolen code audit logs, screenshots of Ryan's emails to contractors, metadata from the fake invoices, proof of payments linked to his personal accounts, a time-stamped confession he didn't know he'd made, an old Slack message where he bragged, "Don't worry, I've got Emily's code covered. She won't be around to talk." By Monday morning, I had a plan. I requested a meeting with CEO Richard Hale, the head of legal, and the CFO. I said I'd found something they needed to see. They scheduled me for 10 a.m. At 9:45, I walked through those glass doors like I owned the place. My heels echoed on the polished floor, every step heavier than the last. The receptionist smiled nervously. Everyone had heard whispers about Ryan's scandal. When I entered the boardroom, Richard looked up from his tablet. "Morning, Emily. You said you had something?" Without a word, I slid the USB drive across the table. "You'll want to open this." He plugged it into the laptop, and as the files loaded, silence fell over the room. The CFO's face went pale. The head of legal adjusted her glasses, her eyes scanning the screen faster and faster. When the Slack screenshots appeared, Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "My God. This has been going on for over a year," I said evenly. "He used my code to secure contracts, falsified data to boost numbers, and siphoned money through third-party accounts. It's all there, every transaction, every signature." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Richard exhaled. "You realize what this means?" I met his gaze. "Yes. It means the company's been defrauded. But it also means you have a chance to fix it and show the board that the system works." He studied me, the corner of his mouth twitching, maybe admiration, maybe disbelief. You built the trap, didn't you? I didn't deny it. I built the truth. He just walked into it. By noon, the entire executive team was mobilized. Lawyers drafted suspension letters. Internal audit teams locked down Ryan's accounts. HR issued statements to staff about an ongoing internal investigation. But the real moment came that afternoon, when Ryan himself walked through the lobby, apparently summoned for a follow-up discussion. I was in the boardroom when he arrived. The door opened, and there he was, pale, shaken, but still trying to keep his arrogant composure.
He froze when he saw me.
You, he hissed. What the hell are you doing here? Before I could answer, Richard spoke. His voice was like a blade. Mr. Moore, please sit. Ryan ignored the chair. This is ridiculous. Whatever she told you, she's lying. She's been unstable since she was. Enough. Richard's voice cut through the room. The bank called again this morning. They sent over the digital ownership records. Your name isn't on any of them, hers is. Ryan blinked, his jaw tightening. The CFO slid a printout across the table, the same one I'd prepared in Project Integrity. Care to explain these invoices, Mr. Moore? His eyes darted over the paper, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't form words. Finally, he snapped. This is a setup. She's framing me. I leaned forward, calm and steady. Framing you? That would require creativity you never had. All I did was keep the receipts. The silence that followed was brutal. Richard stood. Ryan Moore, as of this moment, you are terminated and under internal investigation for fraud, data theft, and breach of corporate trust. Security will escort you out. Ryan's face turned crimson. You can't do this to me. I built this company's core. I stood too, meeting his eyes for the last time.
No, Ryan.
I did. Security guards appeared at the door. He tried to lunge toward me. One last act of desperation, but they held him back. As he was dragged away, he shouted over his shoulder. You think you've won, Emily? You'll regret this. But I didn't feel fear anymore. Just clarity. After he was gone, Richard turned to me. That was impressive. I nodded. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about balance. He smiled faintly. You brought balance, all right. The board's meeting tonight. I'll be recommending your reinstatement at an executive level. I left the building that day to the sound of whispers following me through the halls. Not pity anymore, but respect. Outside, the sky was clearing after days of rain. I stopped, looking up, letting the sunlight hit my face. For the first time in years, I felt free. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because revenge has a way of echoing, and Ryan's echo was still out there, waiting to fade. They say revenge doesn't fix the past, it just decorates it with a prettier scar. Maybe that's true. But sometimes, that scar is a reminder that you survived what was meant to destroy you. The day after Ryan's firing, the entire company felt like it had taken a collective breath. For months, his name had been a shadow hanging over everyone's desks. Now it was gone, erased like the files he once demanded I delete. Except I wasn't the same Emily who had obeyed that command. In the weeks that followed, I took over as lead technical advisor, reporting directly to the CEO. My new office overlooked the city, the same skyline I used to watch from the bus stop, wondering if I'd ever matter here. Every morning, I'd walk in early, just like I used to. But now, people looked up when I entered. They smiled. They said my name. It wasn't fame I felt, it was something quieter, deeper. Validation. I rebuilt the AI system from the ground up, this time under my name. I brought in new developers, people who'd once been overlooked, just like I had. I made sure they got credit for every line they wrote, every spark of innovation they contributed. Because I'd learned the hard way that recognition isn't about ego, it's about fairness. Meanwhile, news of Ryan's downfall spread beyond the office. Within a month, he was under federal investigation for wire fraud and corporate theft. The fake invoices and shell companies were too elaborate to hide. His professional licenses were revoked. Every door he had once walked through with confidence now slammed shut behind him. One night, about 6 weeks after it all ended, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, You happy now? It was him. The message was short. You think this makes you better than me? You destroyed my career. My life. I built everything you're standing on. I stared at it for a long time before replying. No, Ryan. You built your empire on lies. I just stopped letting you stand on my back. I never heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder what happened to him. Maybe he's somewhere far away, blaming everyone but himself. Maybe he's still convincing people he was the victim. But it doesn't matter. The truth lives on its own. It doesn't need an audience. As for me, I finally started living again. I rented a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, just mine. I filled it with books, plants, and light. On weekends, I'd go hiking or take long drives to nowhere, letting silence replace the noise that used to fill my head. One Sunday, I found myself sitting at a park bench overlooking the water. The sky was orange with sunset, and the air smelled like new beginnings. A little girl nearby was trying to build a sandcastle. Every time a wave came in, it knocked her work down. But she didn't cry. She just started over. I smiled. That was life, wasn't it? You build, you lose, you build again. And if you're smart, you build stronger the next time. That's what I did. When Revenge Files, the internal nickname my coworkers had jokingly given me, started circulating on social media, people reached out. Developers, engineers, women from across the country messaged me. I've been through this. Your story gave me courage. I wish I'd done what you did. And for the first time, I realized my story wasn't just revenge, it was resistance. What Ryan did wasn't unique. There are countless Ryans out there, taking credit for others' brilliance, exploiting the quiet ones who keep the world running. But maybe my story, my scar, would make at least one of them think twice before trying again. Months later, Richard Hale invited me to present at a national tech conference. My topic? Ethics in Artificial Intelligence, the human cost of corporate theft. Standing on that stage, under bright white lights, I looked out at hundreds of faces, some curious, some skeptical. I took a breath and began. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we forget the human intelligence behind it, the late nights, the unseen effort, the silent creators whose names never make it to the credits. This is a story about one of them.
About me.
When I finished, the applause didn't just sound like appreciation. It sounded like closure. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and looked at my old project folder. It was still there, the one I'd once deleted from the company servers. I renamed it one last time. Phoenix. Because that's what revenge really is, not destruction but rebirth. You burn what was taken from you, not out of anger, but to create something new, something stronger. And as I watched the city lights flicker outside my window, I realized I didn't need to keep reliving that day in Ryan's office anymore. He said, "Delete everything."
I did.
But I didn't delete myself. I just rewrote the code. And that was the story of the deleted code. Sometimes revenge isn't about anger. It's about reclaiming what was taken from you. Your voice, your worth, your name. Emily didn't just destroy what hurt her, she rebuilt herself from the ashes. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't payback, it's power. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Files for more stories of justice, betrayal, and the people who refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment below, backhand index pointing down. Tell me what you would have done if you were in Emily's place. And remember, every file leaves a trace, and every lie has an expiration date.